As a law enforcement officer, my fundamental duty is to serve mankind, to safeguard lives and property, to protect the innocent against deception, the weak against oppression or intimidation, and the peaceful against violence or disorder, and to respect the constitutional rights of all men to liberty, equality, and justice. I will keep my private life unsullied as an example to all, maintain courageous calm in the face of danger, scorn, or ridicule, develop self-restraint, and be constantly mindful of the welfare of others. Honest in thought and deed in both my personal and official life, I will be exemplary in obeying the laws of the land and the regulations of my department. Whatever I see or hear of a confidential nature or that is confided to me in my official capacity will be kept ever secret unless revelation is necessary in the performance of my duty. I will never act officiously or permit personal feelings, prejudices, animosities, or friendships to influence my decisions. With no compromise for crime and with a relentless prosecution of criminals, I will enforce the law courteously and appropriately, without fear or favor, malice or ill will, never employing unnecessary force or violence, and never accepting gratuities. I recognize the badge in my office as a symbol of public faith, and I accept it as a public trust to be held so long as I am true to the ethics of police service. I will constantly strive to achieve these objectives and ideals, dedicating myself before God and to my chosen profession, law enforcement. Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Tillman. And today, on a little bit of a more somber note, I want to talk to you guys about the incident that occurred yesterday in Minneapolis involving George Floyd. What I just read to you guys was a law enforcement code of ethics. And what you don't realize is that most police officers across the country, when they graduate the police academy, we recite that code of ethics. It's ingrained in us, we memorize it, and we also make sure we take it to heart because we have to know what we accept to do as this job. And the reason I read that law enforcement code of ethics to you right now is because I want you guys to know what I signed up for. The reason why I do what I do. The reason why I became a police officer is to protect people. It's to help people. It's to save people in their most dire need. What I did not sign up to do is I did not sign up to act immorally or unethically or take somebody's life who didn't deserve to die. And what we witnessed yesterday in Minneapolis was a situation in which an officer didn't care about human life. As hard as this video was to watch, what was most depressing about the video was it felt like the officer didn't have a care in the world for the subject that was on the ground. I want you guys to realize that in my job, in our job as officers, we do have an obligation to go out and protect people. We have an obligation to solve crime. And many times in our profession, people will use resistance and force against us. But I will also tell you is that when they are no longer a threat, if they are not resisting, I do not have the power. I cannot go ahead and remove your rights from you as a human being and take your life because I don't care about you. I have a personal obligation to preserve life, preservation of life. It's an obligation. I've handled situations like these before. I was actually at a situation like this last week, actually, where we had a guy on his stomach who said he couldn't breathe, and we had to hobble his feet, put a rope around his feet because he kept kicking our police car. He had steel-toe boots on, and he was really a threat to a lot of people. So we put him on his stomach, we handcuffed him, and he told us he couldn't breathe. But the first thing we did is we rolled him on his side, made sure that he couldn't breathe. And so one thing that we have to do, or make sure that he could breathe, but one thing that we have to do as officers is we have to get rid of excuses, because I know that's coming. I've already got some, actually. The excuse of, well, what if he was resisting beforehand? Well, even if let's just say he was resisting, does it allow those officers to continue to utilize force against him when he stops resisting? The sad part about this video is that after several minutes of George Floyd's body going limp, the officer still didn't even look down at him to see if he was okay. And so the moment a person stops resisting, we need to make sure that we preserve their life if they are going through a medical emergency. Excuse number 2. Well, maybe he was using drugs and maybe he went to a cardiac arrest because of the drugs. Just because a person uses drugs does not allow me to say, oh, well, you don't get any medical help because you use those drugs. If a person is going through a cardiac arrest or emergency, whatever it is, a medical emergency, I have every obligation to save his life just as much as the next person. So we can throw that excuse out the window. The other excuse is this. Hey, well, he was spitting on us and, we wanted to wait there for EMS. There's ways that you can get that situation, make that situation better. Roll him on his side, sit him up, let him breathe, put him in the back of a police car, throw a spit sock on him. The reason I can tell you about these different ways or different methods that they could have chose is because I've been in situations as such many times. I've dealt with people that said, that are going through a series of what we call excited delirium, which is they can't breathe. Their body starts heating up internally. I've gone through those situations. And the moment somebody tells me that they can't breathe or they're hurting is my obligation to make sure I check on the welfare of that individual, because I don't want to be the officer that sits there and stands by as this person takes his last breath. The video was very, very hard to watch, and I am upset. And the reason I'm upset is not just because that officer allowed that person to die yesterday, Mr. George Floyd. It's because all the work that officers across the world are doing to repair the bond between law enforcement and the community is tainted and is tarnished because of acts like that. We have to be able to stand up and call a spade for what it is. You guys know me. I'm always telling you guys, hey, I do research. I'm going to do as much research as I can. And I do that, and I say that because I know I can be put in a controversial position tomorrow or today when I go to work. But there's also a time and place where we know what's wrong is wrong. And the only way we're going to make this profession better, the only way we're going to garnish the trust amongst our community is being honest and being able to hold each other accountable. This was an emotional situation, and I feel bad for not only George Floyd's family, but the officers involved. I feel bad for their families. I feel bad for the departments. I feel bad for the communities. I feel bad for everybody as a society because we're becoming more and more divided. But there is hope, and here's the hope. George Floyd, everybody else that has lost their life unjustly, I promise you that I'm going to continue to do what I can do to be the best officer I can be, stand up for what's right, call out what's wrong, and I'm going to try to bring as much people with me as I can. I will continue to do the Tillman mistakes as educational purposes. I didn't show the whole video on this one simply for the fact of is if that was my family member, I wouldn't necessarily want this continue to be reposted. If you're an officer out there, I want to leave you one last thing. Picture yourself watching that video and imagine George Floyd being one of your family members. Would it be easy to stomach? Every second you watch that video, every second that elapsed, you know that that might be a possible chance for the officers to roll him over, get some air, and maybe, just maybe, he might live. Would you be able to watch that video the same way you're watching this video? If you can't, then we need to stand up and call out what's right and what's wrong. Our jobs are very tough. Law enforcement is a very, very tough profession, and it's not going to get easier if we don't stand up and hold ourselves accountable. But the community, to you guys, we can do better. I know we can do better. We will do better. So I don't acknowledge the actions of that officer yesterday in Minneapolis at all. His actions were wrong. It was inhumane. It was deplorable, and I do not stand by that. But I'm not going to get up and stop doing what I'm doing just because we had a mishap in this profession. We're going to keep pushing. We're going to move forward. So I hope today that you guys realize that that oath that I read at the beginning of this video, I take that to heart every single day. There are sentences in that oath that I live by every single day. The last line of that oath that I took says, I'm dedicated myself before God to this chosen profession. I don't do this job for any other reason because I've dedicated myself before God. That is my ultimate judge. And like I tell everybody, even the prisoners that I've transported to jails, people on the street, my family, my wife, my kids, I'm not the judge. Only God can judge. And so, although I can call out a bad situation, although I can acknowledge the wrong in that situation, I still have to find it a place in my heart of forgiveness, because that's what's going to allow me to forgive the next person who also deserves forgiveness. I'm not asking you to forgive those officers, not one bit. But what I am telling you is that we have to make sure that we got to move forward, see the bright side in every situation in life, and let's move forward with the hope that we can do this together. I love you. God bless you, and I'll see you on the next one.